All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, which is a part of the Talkwalker Love Brands 2021 Expert Series. So we'll just maybe wait for 1 more minute for more people to join us, and then we'll get started. Okay, I think we can get started with our session. So once again, thank you to everyone for joining us today for our webinar as part of the Talkwalker Love Brand 2021 campaign. So the topic that we'll be speaking on for today's session is Take a Step Back, Reimagining Brand Love in Today's World. I'm Nadira and I'm the APAC Field Marketing Officer for Talkwalker. And with me today, I have our expert panelists from Axiata Group Berhad, Fernie, Ghazzaly, as well as Moiz. So before we get things rolling, here are just some housekeeping pointers to take note of. So to avoid any buffering issues, do close any bandwidth heavy apps that you might have open. Also, if you'd like to find out more information and insights into the topic of brand love, do download our latest Talkwalker Brand Love Report. If you would like to share any interesting insights from our session today on social media, feel free to use the hashtags that you see here. So our session for today will last for approximately 45 to 50 minutes. And if at any point you would like to ask any questions, feel free to post them on the Q&A window and we'll get to it at the end of the session during our Q&A segment. So for those of you who haven't heard about Talkwalker before this, here's a quick introduction. So we're an enterprise listening company and we help the world's largest brands drive revenue by activating the voice of their customers. So we are present in 9 offices worldwide. Our HQ is in Luxembourg and we have offices in New York, San Francisco, Frankfurt, Paris, Singapore, Tokyo, London, and Milan. And our team consists of over 400 experts, engineers, and data scientists. And now, how about a quick introduction of Axiata from our panelists?
Thank you, Nadira. Hello, everyone. I'm Fernie, and I'm the head of brand and marketing at Axiata Group. Axiata, for those of you who are not familiar, we are a leading telecommunications group in Asia. Our footprint covers 11 countries within South Asia and Southeast Asia, with over 12,000 employees spread out across the group. Our businesses can be described along 3 core pillars, namely digital telcos, comprising of our 6 telecommunications companies in Malaysia, Indonesia, Cambodia, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. We are also in digital businesses where we operate in the areas of digital financial services, digital analytics and advertising, as well as consulting and solutions. And finally, our third pillar is in the infrastructure business, where we have E.co, a company that builds towers for telco networks, connecting communities and businesses across the Asian region. With me here today, I have 2 of my colleagues from Dialog Axiata, which is the leading telco and one of the most powerful brands in Sri Lanka, and from ADA, our digital analytics and data-driven advertising company. Guys, maybe you want to introduce yourselves?
Thank you, Fernie. Hello, everyone. This is Gazzaly from Dialog. I head the digital marketing team at Dialog Axiata PLC. So Dialog, those who might have heard about or not, So we are the largest telecommunication company in Sri Lanka. We started our journey about 25 years ago, rather we are in the 26th year, and we have about 17 million customers across our diversified products available in this market, and the company delivers advanced mobile telephony services as well as high-speed mobile broadband services in the country. So, Moiz, over to you about giving introduction about ADA and what they do.
Sure. Thanks, Gazzaly. This is Moiz here. Hi, everyone. I take care of marketing services and also strategy for ADA. We'd like to think that we're not creative, just a campaign delivery agency or an outfit. We're very focused on analytics. Data is at the heart of everything that we do. We are also an AI company, and we integrate digital analytics and marketing solutions, and we execute them across 9 markets in ASEAN and South Asia. And we have a lot of leading partners and brands in order to drive their digital plans and data maturity as well in order to achieve their business goals. So that's who we are. Back to you, Nadira.
All right, so now that we are all more familiar with our speakers for today, this will be the agenda for our session. So right after this, I will share with you a bit more about this whole topic of brand love, what it means, what it's all about, after which we'll kick off the expert panel discussion with our panelists, and then we'll end off with some key steps and takeaways for brands to build brand love. And finally, we'll have our Q&A segment where we will address some of your questions. Okay, so what is brand love all about? So what we really wanted to do through this brand love campaign is to determine the brands that people don't just like buying, but brands that they connect with on a deeper level, on an emotional level. So why this is important is really because of the impact that this kind of connection has on brands. It not only helps to advocate brand loyalty during these current times that we are seeing today, but when businesses are able to foster a stronger relationship with their consumers, it also puts them in a position to establish a price premium and really strengthen that connection with their consumers. So what we wanted to do was to identify the brands out there who have successfully driven brand love, how they did it, what were the methods that they employed, and how something like brand love can be measured. So what we did for this campaign was we analyzed around 1,228 brands across the world and in 30 different industries, and we measured things like their engagement rate, sentiment, joy-related messages, as well as love-related messages that consumers were saying about these brands. And based on this, we shortlisted around 153 most loved brands globally and in different regions. So as a matter of fact, Axiata Berhad was also one of the top 10 most loved brands that we identified in Asia Pacific. So from our research and analysis as well, we've identified these key 11 methods that brands employ in order to drive brand love. So during our panel discussion later, some of these methods will also be explained and shared in greater detail. So with that, we've reached our panel discussion for today, and the topic is Take a Step Back, Reimagining Brand Love in Today's World. So before we kick things off and get started with our questions for our panelists, I just wanted to share a bit more about this topic and why this is something that we decided to speak on today. So when we were discussing with the Axiata team, our speakers, on what would really be beneficial for us to share with our audience for today, and considering the current situation that we see today with so many changes, how the world really changed a lot in the past 1.5 years. So we felt like this whole idea of taking a step back was something we really wanted to highlight because it's important for us to take a pause and really reassess the situation that we see. And yeah, I'd like to have Fernie to also share a bit about this topic and what it means.
Thanks, Nadira. Yeah, so when we were discussing about brand love, right, and how to cultivate it in a year like 2020, which was really unprecedented, and about what we didn't necessarily knew what to do, but what was very clear was that we had to have a different modus operandi from the years before, right? We couldn't just keep doing the same things that we were doing. consumers and businesses alike were in a state of turmoil. Our lives and our livelihoods were literally turned upside down. So, we had to stop and take a step back to really assess what was happening to us and happening to our consumers, and refigure things out again on how we could still be relevant in this new world, right? So really it was kind of like having to take a step back in order to move forward. And so we felt that was quite a key thing to consider when growing, thinking about growing brand love in this past year.
All right, so now that we all have a better idea on the topic and the direction for today's session, I think it's a good time to start off with our first question for our panelists. So what would you say are the biggest changes and challenges you've observed over the past year? Maybe Moiz, you'd like to start?
Sure, Nadira. I think this is a very interesting and an important question because there are two variations to this. There are changes and challenges both, right? So first we'll look at the changes. And what was the biggest change that we noticed was, when it comes to people's needs, right? So if you look at, how people's pre-COVID needs were, from top to bottom, it was all about, themselves and, what they were trying to achieve out there, and also at the same time, then, friendships, family and intimacy, safety, physiological needs, which were much more functional in nature, they came later on. But post-COVID, the entire pyramid got flipped in a way because the needs then started, traveling from the bottom to the top, right? So the focus was all about on the basic needs, that how do you survive in this environment? How do you, kind of adjust? The safety became such a big priority. When it comes to, love and belonging, that kind of had a new meaning altogether. I mean, I had I had friends who I wouldn't call friends. They started calling up, and they wanted to kind of rekindle their relationship and just catch up because there was so much of uncertainty and anxiety as well. And then, of course, you would think about yourself in terms of what you wanted to achieve, and then, of course, the focus would be on the self. But mainly, the needs were focused on the bottom half of the pyramid in terms of needs, and the entire priorities kind of changed for people.
Yes, right. So Moiz, as what you said, right, the whole pyramid had flipped and our consumers' needs changed. How this affected brands, right? Brands suddenly found ourselves on the back foot. We had to rethink all our assumptions and we had to realign our priorities to match these changing consumer expectations. And of course, none of us were prepared for it, right? Consumers' needs were actually changing faster than we could adapt to fulfill them. And I'll give you a very good example with our telco companies, right? They had, for years and years, have been, optimizing their networks to match a typical consumer pattern, right? Where there was a 9 to 5 work day, and then there's a morning commute and evening commute, and then a late evening social media or entertainment consumption at home. And suddenly this whole pattern changed, and we had to deal with a new set of demands that was brought about by the lockdowns, right? So recalibrating our networks to fulfill the new demand, well, that took time. And of course, there was a lag. And this same kind of situation happened not just in our industry, but also in other industries, right? Like, for example, big, large-scale retailers suddenly finding themselves having to pivot to e-commerce, and not all of them were really geared up and prepared for that. So in the immediate aftermath, consumers felt let down by brands. There was a study by the Edelman Brand Trust Barometer in 2020. They ran it in Q2, immediately, like 2-3 months after the lockdowns began. And it showed that trust levels for corporations had dropped significantly. And corporate leaders were perceived to be doing the worst job of all in meeting the demands that was placed upon them by the pandemic, as compared to government leaders or NGO leaders. Right. Of course, today, 1 year later, things have changed completely. But at that time, that was how brands were being viewed by the consumers, and we had to deal with that challenge.
Right. I think that's a very important point that you mentioned, that, the fact that there was a question mark on trust itself. And that's like the foundation of any relationship, whether it's with a brand or whether it's with a person as well. And so this whole question mark, brings me to another perspective, that this pandemic has actually raised a lot more questions than it has been able to answer. A lot more of that, because there were so many changes that ultimately we were kind of stuck, in dilemmas. As brands, you would think, as you think about whether you want to focus on the product, on promoting your product, or do you want to focus on the solution? Do you want to focus on purpose, or do you want to focus on profit? And the question always remained that how do you intertwine them? Because as brands, and I hope you agree with me, Fernie, is that it's brands, it's far easier to address challenges, but like, how do you address dilemmas, right? And that was where we were stuck in many ways.
All right, Moiz and Fernie, I think you guys really encapsulated really well the extent of change that we see today, and how people's needs really turn 180 degrees, and really every single aspect of our lives have changed over the past 1 to 1.5 years. So this actually brings me to my next question. What does it really mean to take a step back when faced with the challenges and changes we see today, as you guys have described?
Right. Again, to be honest, as Fernie kind of encapsulated right at the start of how we came about this topic as well, right? So taking a step back was from a consumer perspective, it was just deep diving into a roller coaster of emotions, right? And you would possibly get into a territory where it would start from disbelief, right? Then you would possibly are faced with panic, right? Because there was a lot of disbelief, there was a lot of skepticism when this happened. There was confusion, a sense of denial, and this kind of reflected in also the conversations that were happening online. And then consumers moved into a panic stage where people were I think they were overloaded with shock, anxiety, stress, and fear. And then, of course, the fact that there were SOPs in place and there was that adjustment phase, right? And then we got into habituation. But habituation led to 2 or 3 things, which was boredom. It created a lot of laziness, right? You were stuck at home for a long time. But of course, there was a sense of positivism because, as human beings, we're wired for positivity, right? So there was positivism in terms of this is going to end at some point of time. But then when it extended, then there was this phase of resistance. There was weariness, frustration, and irritation that when will this get over? And there was, of course, relief when things started to look better. The cases started dropping. All right. And then, of course, there was a lot of hope driven through that relief. But then again, we were stuck back with the second wave, and it keeps coming back to us. Then there was this whole phase of apprehension. So, I mean, you can see a straight line on the slide, but I think it was more like a roller coaster of emotions, and you didn't know which direction the roller coaster was swinging in, because it was completely going back and forth. So that made it very imperative, for brands, for businesses, to monitor which phase of emotion were people in, and accordingly, try and communicate with them. I think Fernie can possibly add on or relate to this a lot more, since she's been, been able to combat that a lot better.
Well, yeah, so now that when we look at things in hindsight, right, everything looks so much clearer. But as we were going through that whole experience, like you said, Moiz, it really was like a roller coaster ride, right? So, but Well, now we have the benefit of some hindsight, and we can see how brands responded to the situation, right? And it's interesting because there was a whole spectrum of responses. And if you think about it, on the one extreme, there were some brands that just went totally dark, right? They stopped advertising, and it seemed like it just disappeared for a while. They were out of sight, and then what happened was they became out of mind. Right. On the other extreme, you have some brands, they just chugged along with their content calendar as though nothing had happened. And then they came across as being, tone deaf. So I mean, I remember that, I actually saw a humorous, like a slapstick comedy kind of ad at that time. And I was thinking to myself, how inappropriate that was. Yeah. So granted, it was unprecedented times, and no brand was prepared for something like that, right? So we couldn't predict how long it would get, it was going to last, and how bad it would get. But despite that, there were some brands, at least now in hindsight, we can see that actually got a few principles right. So firstly, of course, is that they listened. Being that things were changing so rapidly and so fluidly, right? It was important to actually keep our finger on the pulse of what was going on and what was happening to our consumers and their psyche. And data was important, right? So, and the interesting thing about data is that, while a lot of data can tell us about what had happened, they are lagging indicators, right? They can tell us about the past, but not a lot of data can actually tell us about the future, about their being leading indicators. And actually, social listening is one of these kind of data that tells you about what you can predict about the future. And really, that whole situation was actually a perfect opportunity for brands, because consumers were expressing themselves on social media more than ever, right? They didn't have any other channel to express themselves, so they all jumped on board social media. And in fact, our own internal research also showed that, we actually ran a research in the middle of last year, and then we found that the use of social media had increased by at least 25% in all our markets. In fact, here in Malaysia, we saw an increase of 46%. So everything that they were saying were there, their issues, their concerns, their worries, their hopes, their frustrations. We just had to be there to listen and pick up the trending topics and predict what were the things that was going to become important for us to pay attention to, right? And then the second thing is to be present, right? So while we're doing all this listening and figuring out what to do, it's important to keep conversations going, right? So I think a lot of some segments of consumers, some groups of consumers were feeling either being abandoned by their favorite brands, or feeling like they were being dismissed, that their issues weren't important because the brands kept going on a narrative that didn't address their issues, right? So even if we don't have the answers or the solutions at the time, it's okay. We just need to acknowledge where they are and offer reassurance and comfort, right? And finally, I think, again, these are all obvious in hindsight, right? Is to be relevant. When you understand the customers and you understand what they are going through, their concerns, try to match what you have to fill a need that addresses some of these concerns, right? In a way that's relevant to them. So we kind of almost need to repackage our plans, repackage our communications, so that we can say it in a way that they can accept as meaningful and value adding to their lives.
Okay, so Fernie, maybe this is a good time if you could also share with us what were some of the specific measures that Axiata adopted in really dealing with these changes and challenges right now.
Well, okay, so so from the insights that we had gathered, we were able to identify what were the key consumer pain points right? And while most of these concerns, they were common across the markets that we were in, we can see that there were different priorities for different markets because they were in different situations. And also, even within the same market, at different points in time, the priorities changed as well. And we could pick all this up from the listening tool, right? So for example, connectivity, or to be more specific, mobile connectivity was a bigger priority in those markets where fixed broadband or fiber broadband footprint was small or even non-existent, such as Cambodia or Nepal. And whereas in mature markets like, say, Malaysia or Indonesia, the demand for something like e-commerce was more of a priority. So, and then we also found that as time went on, while the lockdowns kept getting extended, financial assistance became a priority in all the markets that we were watching. Then, so from there, we then identified, right, okay, who are we and what can we do to solve some of these issues that our consumers were facing, be it in the immediate term or in the longer term. So in fact, one of the first things that we did across all our markets was to offer free data, right? The demand for data had suddenly shot up, and we can see this from our own data usage, right? So and without some sort of concession from us, we knew that our consumers will struggle with the spike in their spending. So we knew that was just something that we had to do, even though it was going to cost us, and this is again where we were faced with that dilemma, right? Is it fulfill our purpose or run after profits, right? And we knew that in the short term, it would be, it will be a short-term pain to have to bear that cost. However, we saw it as an investment for some long-term benefits, right, that we can get over time. The customers are going to remember what we did, and it's going to gain us the loyalty and love in the long run. So, I felt that we were actually quite lucky because the business that we were in, we were well positioned in the sense that, we already had a variety of solutions and products and applications that were readily available. And I can give some examples of this, right? So for example, e-learning, we have e-learning solution in several of our markets. For example, in Bangladesh, it's called Robi 10-Minute School. And then we also have e-payment services. We have e-wallet in Malaysia, it's called Boost. And then for infotainment, we have a video on demand platform in Sri Lanka, it's called Dialog TV. So these were already there. And what we could do was we could quickly build relevant offers on top of these services that were meaningful for the customers at that time. And then all we needed to do was to communicate them to the right audiences and using our always on communication channels to reach the right people where they would receive these communications in a way that they will find meaningful for their lives. Right. So I would say one of our most significant initiative, in my opinion, at least, I think it was a key contributing factor for us in building brand love last year, was the Axiata COVID-19 Assistance Program, where we had pledged 150 million ringgit to assist micro SMEs during the extended lockdown period. And it wasn't just about the funds that we had pledged. It was also because we were able to deploy it almost immediately. I think it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks after we started the lockdowns that we had rolled out this assistance program. And we could do that because we already had a fully digitalized micro lending platform that was able to process requests fully online within a matter of hours. It's called Aspirasi Assist, right? So, because we were in a position where, we had a lot of their solutions already in hand for the issues that consumers were going through, we were able to respond quickly with these solutions and quickly address the current needs at the time. And therefore we stayed relevant, right, to our consumers. And that way we were able to garner a lot of positive sentiments, right? And we then took this and we mined this and we turned them into social content. And using that social content, we were able to extend our reach even more and further amplify the positivity. Yeah, so maybe Ghazzaly, you can share some more specific and local examples from Sri Lanka.
Sure. Thank you, Fernie. I think the insight was common across all the markets. One of the things that, as Moiz said in the beginning of the slides, that emotions are roller coasters, right? People were never had the same emotions. I'm myself now in a lockdown still. So Sri Lankan as a country, we always love our weekends. We love to travel. We always live that Highlander life. Right. So when this COVID situation started coming in, then government imposed a lockdown. People were stuck inside a frame, or rather inside a compartment or an apartment. So people started really feeling frustrated. And as you correctly mentioned earlier, that people started looking at corporates beyond government. So they wanted the corporate to come and help them, like as a responsible company like Dialog. What we realized was one of the important things we need to do for this community, that building them, or rather rebuilding them, because it was broken into pieces with these unexpected situations. So as a brand, one of the strategy we took to keep this brand love as high as always, one is that building the communities back. That's one. Then again, we realized at the situation like this, where everybody's stuck inside home, they they wanted connectivity, they wanted entertainment. Then another important aspect we want as a corporate, we want to make it better, was healthcare segment. With the help of Axiata funds and as well as our own fund, we were able to help healthcare sector by building ICU beds. People may ask why, as a brand, Dialog needs to build ICU beds for a hospital, because we felt we have responsibility to give back to the community when it needed the most. So that's one of the activity that we did to make sure that community is getting helped by a corporate. Then one thing, as Sri Lankans, we have years and years of uh, culture. So we love our culture. We are very diversified in terms of religions and races in this country. So one of the things we realized that during this lockdown, there's a festival called Vesak in Sri Lanka, where people go to the streets, they watch pandals, they roam around the streets and enjoy with their families and friends. Of course, with this lockdown, doing all of these activities were very nearly impossible, or rather impossible. What we realized was, as a brand, we wanted to keep that culture going. We wanted to make sure that heritage is passed to the generations. So what we did was we built new platforms so that customers can communicate, they can experience the same thing, probably not in a physical way, but in a digital way. So these kind of small activities, even when we looked at it, we had more than 70 to 80 activities on digital platforms alone, to make sure that consumers are staying home, staying safe, as well as they are rebuilding their connections with the help of free data. And as you correctly mentioned, Dialog TV was offered for all the customers without any cost for about more than 1 month. So that was something as a brand we did. These were some of the strategies that helped probably believe to keep the brand love as always high. So these are a few things that we did in terms of strategies to make sure that we have a positive impact on the brand.
Okay, I really like that you shared with us a bit more about some cultural practices, and what the consumers are like in Sri Lanka in terms of their lifestyle. So I think all this really highlights the fact that in different markets, consumers would have different needs, different issues depending on the unique nature of that market, and how a customized approach is important instead of like a one size fits all strategy for all the markets. So this brings me to my next question. If you could give some advice For brands out there that are trying to drive brand love, what would it be?
Sure. So let me take from the brand perspective. So as Fernie said, some brands were doing the same thing they were doing pre-COVID, during COVID, even post-COVID, they were doing the same thing. There was no change in their comms. Then some brands were forced to give that always-on communication like us because we are an essential service if you look at it, because everybody's inside home. So one of the things we realized that we can't, because of the emotion change, because of the roller coaster of emotion, as Moiz said earlier, that we can't give the same message to the customers. The communication needs to be changed. So what we realize as a brand, we need to capture the heart share of every single customers, including businesses, individuals, homes, everywhere. So one thing we realized that we need to understand local context very well. That's where we got the help from the data, social listening, understanding what customers want and what kind of things they are posting. As other markets in Sri Lanka also, we saw new platforms getting emerged. We saw people are using digital heavily. I think I saw this quote somewhere. They were saying every company investing money on digitization, but COVID made it next level. Right, automatically it took to digitization to the next level. So the brands were forced to do that, as well as us. Our communication had to change. We were showcasing our brand purpose with meaningful messages. If you do the same thing again as always, it will not work in this context. I think if you want to keep the brand love, first you need to understand the context of your market, probably customize your comms accordingly. Next on, you need to show the human side of your brand, because you can always say you can't sell at this moment. You have to show that human touch of your brand to the people. That's probably the way forward also, I believe, because this situation is going to be normal. We can expect anytime lockdown. As Sri Lanka, we are in our third lockdown phase right now. So situation, we don't know what kind of situation ahead of us. So make sure a brand, my one tip would be, the brand should always show their purpose in a human manner. I think Fernie and Moiz would have more to add to this.
Right. Thank you, Ghazzaly. Yeah. So I would say something a little bit corny, which is, seems rather obvious. To get love, first you have to give love. And in the context of brands, it means showing your consumers that you truly understand them and understand what they're going through, and that you're going to be with them all the way, right? Whether it's the good times or the bad times. And rather than just, sticking to our path, our pre-planned calendar of all the marketing activities that we want to do, we have to stop and also listen to our consumers, where they are, what they are thinking, what they are feeling. And then we have to match our communications and our offerings to suit where they are at that time. Right. So Moiz, you want to say a little something about that?
Sure. I think you've captured the essence of the thought itself so well that I can just add on a little bit more to that. Is the fact that we're always talking about we have to rethink the experience. But when people talk about rethinking the experience, they think about the fact that it's going to be virtual, and that's obvious. But we're going to use drones, or we're going to use VR or AR and a lot of other things, right? But it's not just about the medium, as you rightly mentioned. You want to love them first, and that's where the journey of the experience begins, which is so critical for us to understand, that we want to champion the little things, right? Because there was this COVID has created that void of simple pleasures as well. And that's what we wanted to focus on, right? That's what we need to focus on. The fact that you could go for a coffee with a friend, or you would cycle to work, or just go to a park as well, or browse shops. Like, these were real treats, and people had been denied that for so long. So you didn't need to create an extraordinary experiences, but the idea of rethinking the experience was to connect to the relevant conversations, as well as connect to what was important for them at that point of time. Like it was all about trying to play a real role in people's lives. So the experience aspect is more about embracing, the current scenario of the culture that was going on. And more importantly, it was about trying to create empathy and joy without, sounding too over the top as a brand. Otherwise, the experience would be, wouldn't sound authentic enough.
Yeah,
Ghazzaly?
correct. Yeah, sorry. So I actually just wanted to touch on that point where you ended, Moiz, whereby, we're not saying that you have to hijack every conversation that you hear out there, or insert yourself in every aspect of the consumer's life. It's about reframing what you already have planned, reframing your products and services and offerings and solutions to become more relevant and meaningful to the consumers at that point in time of where they are, right? So, and that with that, I'll circle back to Gazzaly's first point, right? That you have to stay true to your purpose. So you're not going to be relevant in every single aspect of every consumer's life. I mean, that's just not going to happen. And when you try to do that, they can feel it. Right? They can feel it. And consumers today are very sophisticated, right? They want brands to have a purpose. It doesn't have to be, the purpose that you champion doesn't have to be the passion point of every consumer. For some, they will find a lot of they will be very attracted to your purpose. And for some others, maybe, but whatever it is, they will respect brands that have purpose, and they will buy from brands that do express their purpose and deliver on them. So in the case of Axiata, right? So we are very clear. We're never veered away from our brand purpose, and that is advancing Asia through technology, innovation, and connectivity. So we're not going to be anything other than this. It just so happened that was kind of the forefront of consumers' needs, because that was the main channel of delivery for just about every experience that you mentioned just now, Moiz, right? So my shopping experience now has to be delivered digitally. My learning experience had to be delivered digitally. My working productivity, even my exercise or entertainment activity all had to be delivered digitally, and that's where we were, right? That's where we operated. We were in the space of connecting people to everything that mattered to them. So every product and solution that we offer speaks to this purpose, right? So stay true to your brand purpose. And I know that this is much easier said than done, right? But I think that as a company, as a brand, you need to know why you exist, and everything has to revolve around that, right? So you innovate also towards your brand purpose, you communicate your brand purpose, and you deliver your promises on that as well. So to me, that's really the path to brand love.
Totally agree. I think you've summed it up so well. Yeah.
Yep. I think you guys have shared some really, really good advice that I'm sure will be very beneficial for our audience today. And I think this is actually a great time for us to move into our Q&A, because I noticed that we have had some questions coming in from the audience. So maybe for the first question, given how big Axiata is, with many brands within the group, what challenges do you face when it comes to really enabling each one of the entities under you to be able to leverage consumer insights and conversation? So what challenges do you face when trying to champion this, and how would you overcome it? Maybe Fernie can take this one.
All right. Thanks, Nadira. Yeah, so as a big conglomerate, as large group that is operating across so many diverse markets, right? So this is always the challenge, is where do we find the balance? And this challenge is not just in marketing, but it's also in multiple functional areas. right? Whereby we know that as a group, when we centralize certain things, we can get a lot of great synergies, right? But at the same time, we also don't want to be so centralized that we become irrelevant in the local context. So there has to be a good balance between centralization and localization. So one example I can give you when it comes to about getting data and insights. So again, here we have various different channels of where we get data, and then based on that channels, we will then determine what's the best way, whether we get it from ground up or from top down, right? So I will give one example of social listening. What we did was we centralized the platform. So we centrally procured the platform and we built the platform and we created dashboards for each of our markets, right? But when it came to inputting the keywords and tracking the details, day-to-day operational part of it, it was managed locally, right? And we have to allow some level of localization in order for the data that we could derive to be insightful for that particular market. So there's a certain level of centralization where we get synergies, but also localization in order to cater for the unique needs of the market.
All right, thank you, Fernie. So maybe for the second question, okay, so for businesses that have a lot of different functions and departments, with different sets of like data and insight, do you have some advice when it comes to overcoming the challenge of data silos? So maybe Moiz or Ghazali, would you like to take this?
Sure, I'll just add on before Ghazali continues. Well, I think this is a question that is very important, and as we're very conscious about this as well. In our own agency, we need to ensure that because data is so interlinked today. So whether it's from a business intelligence perspective, or whether it's from a MarTech perspective, whether it's from an AI perspective, or whether it's even from a communication and media perspective, right? The idea of deep diving into data is to ensure that you're able to capture opportunities and the challenges that come along with it. But most importantly, there are opportunities and there are insights that you can use to drive business growth, to drive and address different problems. So since data is so interlinked, there are no silos as such. In fact, data is available to everyone in our organization, because the access to data improves and possibly qualifies us to come up with new opportunities and also address different problems. So that's how we look at it. Gazzaly, would you like to add on? And Fernie, of course, as well. Yeah.
So as Moiz correctly said, we are an organization, be it a group or an individual opco. So we reside on a large set of data. So we are, if somebody wants to understand consumer insights, we are the best one to do so. So what we have done in the organization, empowered multiple divisions. Even we have internal projects and programs to empower each and every unit to make sure that they do their data digging and they come with insights of their own and share with other respective divisions, so that their functionalities and their work can be streamlined and we all can go to market with one common message. Because sometimes data silos can lead to a bad customer experience, right? So one is talking about something else and what customer wants different. So what we realized is this synergy across all the units are very crucial. So that's what we are building. And even, for example, we have gone up to an extent that training individuals in the divisions and empower them to do their data analysis by themselves, rather than depending on one particular team like a business intelligence. So having data silos will definitely going to affect organizations. By addressing the root cause and probably having a program or a project in place to empower end users will definitely help to go to market with one message to one single customers. So that will definitely going to help the omni-channel experience as well. That's my thoughts around it.
All right, thank you, Ghazali. So I think in the interest of time, we will go through one last question for today. So the question is, as a conglomerate with a presence in multiple countries, how easy or difficult was it to move quickly based on evolving consumer behavior or expectations? And did you have an internal task force, for instance? Maybe Fernie, you'd like to take this one?
All right. Yeah, so I'll take this one. Yeah, so being a big company, right? So we actually adopt a model, actually it's a operating model, a collaborative operating model that we call collective brain. So we know that we're not going to have all the answers. We were faced with that situation where everyone didn't know what to expect and what was coming. And the good thing, oh no, it's not really a good thing, but at least good for us, was that each of our market was at different stages. They were the COVID wave did not hit every market the same way and in the same speed, right? So there was actually learnings that we could learn from each other, and that's the way that we have set up our operating model, which we call the collective brain. So when something happens in each market, we have a way of collating all of the learnings and seeing what can be applied across other markets. So when an opportunity is capitalized upon and we find wins, we get certain wins in a particular market, we can quickly apply and adapt it so that we can then get a similar win in other markets as well. So it's not always going to be, central knows everything and then disseminate like hub and spoke kind of model. It's more of like ideas can come from anywhere within the group. And then we try to apply the relevance and quickly adopt it in wherever else that it makes sense. So I hope that answers the question.
Yep, I think it definitely did. So in the interest of time, those were all the questions that we could address for today. But if you would like to find out more about the brand love story, the insights, and assess the full list of brands that made it to the most loved brands in 2021, do download our Talkwalker report. So this brings us to the end of our session for today. Thank you to our panelists, Moiz, Fernie, and Ghazali for joining us today. I think what you've shared has been very insightful, and I'm sure it'll be very beneficial to our audience and other brands out there. And to all of you who tuned in for today, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you learned a thing or two. And yeah, hope to speak with you again. So have a good rest of the day, everyone. And once again, thank you.
All right, thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks, Fernie. Thanks, Ghazali. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.